Hey guys, MJ Madness here, and the 2017 Stanley Cup Playoffs begin on Wednesday. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you my predictions. Basically, what I'm going to be doing is giving you my picks and my bracket all the way from the first round up to the Stanley Cup Final, breaking down each matchup series by series, and giving you my reasoning and thoughts behind each decision. So, without further ado, let's get into the predictions. Starting things out west, we have the Nashville Predators taking on the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, I think this should be a very entertaining matchup, as these are two very strong teams, and it definitely should be close. While Nashville may be the underdogs, I definitely think they can give Chicago a run for their money. They have a really solid team, arguably the best defense in the NHL, and I definitely think they'll put up a fight. But in the end, the skill and experience of the Chicago Blackhawks will prove too much for the Nashville Predators, so I'm taking the Blackhawks in 7 games. Next up, we have the Minnesota Wild taking on the St. Louis Blues. Now, this should be a very entertaining physical series between two very solid Central Division teams. Now, the St. Louis Blues really have gotten hot as of late, and Vladimir Tarasenko remains one of the best pure scorers in the NHL, but I really like the Minnesota Wild. I think they have great depth, and in the end, that will be enough to overcome St. Louis. I'm taking the Wild in 6 games. Now, we have the Calgary Flames versus the Anaheim Ducks. Now, a lot of people think the Ducks will win this series easily, but I actually think it will be very close. This will be a tough physical battle between two rival teams. Looking at the Calgary Flames, there is a lot to like. Backlund, Frolik, and Tkachuk form one of the best shutdown lines in the league, and pair that with Gaudreau and Monahan on your first line, and you have a really high-powered offense. Perhaps it's matched equally or even better by Anaheim, with Ryan Kessler, Corey Perry, and Ryan Getzlaf headlining their offense, and they also have a lot of depth on the third and fourth line that Calgary may not have. On defense, you have two very solid teams. Giordano and Dougie Hamilton form one of the best pairings in the NHL, while once again Anaheim has a lot of depth on defense. Goaltending, I definitely see it being equal, and I think this should be a very close and well-fought series. While my heart tells me to go with the Calgary Flames, they have struggled in Anaheim, losing 26 straight at the Honda Center, and in the end, I think the Ducks will just be able to get it done, so I'm taking the Anaheim Ducks in 7. The final Western Conference first-round matchup has the Edmonton Oilers taking on the San Jose Sharks. Now, the Edmonton Oilers snapped their 10-year postseason drought with a bang. Connor McDavid scored 100 points, the most in the NHL, and already rivals Sidney Crosby for the title of best player in the league. Pair him with Leon Draisaitl, and you have one of the best top lines in the league. The only question with Edmonton, though, is the depth behind them. They really are a one-line team, carried by McDavid and to a lesser extent Draisaitl and Patrick Maroon, with Cam Talbot holding the fort in goal. I have questions about whether Talbot will be able to keep up with the workload, and he is relatively unproven in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. The San Jose Sharks are the same as ever. While Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau continue to age, the core is stuck together, and with Brett Burns having a monster season on defense, they can never be counted out. So for this series, my first upset pick, I think the San Jose Sharks should be able to take down the Edmonton Oilers in 6 games, despite being the lower seed. Moving on over to the East, up first we have the Montreal Canadiens against the New York Rangers. Now this is a battle between arguably the top 2 goalies in the NHL, in Henrik Lundqvist and Carey Price. I think this definitely will be a close series, but I give Montreal the edge. I think they have more depth, and I think Carey Price is the best goalie in the National Hockey League, and that should be enough for them to dispose of the New York Rangers in 6 games. Next, the Ottawa Senators take on the Boston Bruins. Looking at Ottawa, they're really carried by Erik Karlsson, in my opinion, the best offensive defenseman in the NHL. The Boston Bruins are led by their top line of Marchand, Bergeron, and Pastrnak, which from a pure numbers perspective is one of the best in the NHL. In goal, Tuukka Rask is still one of the best, and I definitely think he'll be able to get it done. While many people may pick the Senators, and while they do have a higher seed, I'm going with another upset pick, and I think the Boston Bruins will be able to knock off the pesky Senators in 6 games. Now, the Washington Capitals take on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, the Leafs are led by Austin Matthews and have one of the best young teams in the NHL. And while that youth definitely looks like it will lead to success, and I could definitely see them contending for the Cup in a couple of years, they're simply not ready. And against a high-powered and deep team like the Washington Capitals, I don't think they'll be able to put up much of a fight. I'm taking the Caps in 5 games. Our final first round matchup has the Pittsburgh Penguins against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, these are two of the best teams in the league, and it's a shame they have to meet in the first round. Columbus has really been cold as of late, but don't let that fool you. They have an extremely skilled team. They are one of my favorite dark horse picks, and against almost anyone else, I would definitely take them to move on, but they will definitely be in tough against the Pittsburgh Penguins. While the Penguins may be injured, they have the experience, they are the defending Stanley Cup champions, and in the end, I think that will prove too much for the upstart Columbus Blue Jackets, and I predict the Pens will be able to get it done, just barely, in 7 games. Moving into the second round, the first matchup out west has the Chicago Blackhawks up against the Minnesota Wild. Now, if you couldn't already tell, I really like this Minnesota Wild team. I think they're extremely deep, and they have a great ability to roll 4 lines. They've definitely improved under Bruce Boudreau, and it will be interesting to see whether he can get it done in the postseason. Devin Dubnyk looks to be solid in goal, and I definitely think they'll give the Hawks a run for their money. Looking to Chicago, though, I just think they're the more experienced team. We've seen in the past Chicago's really had Minnesota's number in the playoffs, and I expect that to continue. I'm taking the Blackhawks in 6. Up next, a matchup between the Anaheim Ducks and the San Jose Sharks. Now, this one definitely will be close, and I predict an intense and hate-filled series. While San Jose may have the best player on the ice in Brett Burns, I'd argue that the Ducks have a better overall team with more depth. It definitely could go either way, but I'm giving the edge to the Ducks. The Sharks have really limped to the finish line and have struggled over the past month. Add that to injuries to Joe Thornton and Logan Couture, and I think the Sharks will struggle with the size and skill of the Ducks. So I'm taking the Anaheim Ducks in 6. Moving east, we have the Montreal Canadiens versus the Boston Bruins. This definitely should be an awesome matchup. These two teams are pretty big rivals, just like the Ducks and Sharks, so definitely expect some physicality. Looking to how these two teams stack up against each other, I definitely give Boston the edge on offense, but looking to defense, Montreal led by Shea Weber definitely should be able to outplay the Boston defense, which is really suffering from some injuries as of late. And in goal, Montreal, of course, has Carey Price. In my opinion, the best goalie in the world, and I think he should be the difference, and in the end, defense and goaltending wins you games in the playoffs, so I'm giving Montreal the edge in 6. And finally, the matchup we're all looking forward to, the Pittsburgh Penguins versus the Washington Capitals. Sidney Crosby versus Alexander Ovechkin, the defending Stanley Cup champs against the President's Trophy winners. This series should be absolutely insane, and I am so excited for it, should it happen. I think these two teams on paper are the two best in the National Hockey League, and whoever wins this series definitely has a real shot of going on to the Stanley Cup Final. Both of these teams are incredibly stacked, and it should be an absolute battle between these two rivals. It was really tough for me to pick and make my decision, and I definitely think this will be one of the closest series to call. In the end, though, I look at the Pittsburgh Penguins roster, and I see them filled with injuries, most notably Chris Letang, and I think this isn't the same Pittsburgh Penguins team that won the Cup last spring. Meanwhile, moving over to the Washington Capitals, with the addition of Kevin Shattenkirk and other savvy moves in the offseason, the Capitals look stronger and better than ever, and I predict this is finally the year the Capitals end their curse of not being able to get past the second round. So yes, I am predicting that the Washington Capitals will be able to dispatch the Pittsburgh Penguins in 7 games. Moving on to the conference finals, in the West we have the Chicago Blackhawks against the Anaheim Ducks. Now these teams both are led by their own dynamic duos, Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews for the Hawks, and Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaf for the Ducks. Now in addition to that, both of these teams have some really great depth players that surround them, including Ryan Kessler and Artemi Panarin, and this definitely should be a bloodbath between two very strong teams. I'm going to give Chicago the edge in this series, though I definitely think this one could go either way. In the end, though, the Ducks haven't shown to me that they can get it done in Game 7s and in tight situations against experienced battle-worn teams like the Chicago Blackhawks, so I'm taking the Blackhawks in 7 for this one. In the East, we have the Washington Capitals up against the Montreal Canadiens. Now, a lot of people think Carey Price can win a series all by himself, and while he can, the Washington Capitals have something nearly as good in Braden Holtby, another elite goaltender in the NHL. I think goaltending is definitely very close in the series, and then looking up to the players, it's very simple that Washington has the edge. They are just such a deep team, they have no real weakness, and I definitely think they should be able to take care of the Montreal Canadiens. Alexander Ovechkin is a legitimate superstar. They have 3 studs on defense. Nicholas Backstrom is one of the most underrated players in the NHL, and I think the Washington Capitals will be able to get it done, meaning the drought of Canada's teams never winning the Stanley Cup will continue, and I'm taking the Capitals to make it to the Stanley Cup Final in 6 games. And finally, the Stanley Cup Final. I am predicting that your 2017 Stanley Cup Final will be between the Washington Capitals and the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, the NHL playoffs are really wide open this year, and I would say there's up to 6 or 7 teams that definitely have a legitimate shot of making it to the Stanley Cup. But in the end, in my head, these are the 2 teams that I feel are the best on paper, and I think these 2 teams have the best chance of getting there. So, this matchup between the Capitals and the Blackhawks should be a good one. These 2 teams are definitely amazing. The experienced Blackhawks against the upstart Washington Capitals. And I definitely think this should be a great final to see. While it's difficult, my prediction for your 2017 Stanley Cup champions is the Washington Capitals. It is very simple. This is the best team in the National Hockey League, and I believe that if all goes right, they definitely can win the Stanley Cup. The optimist in me sees and thinks that they will be able to get it done. They are simply too deep, too skilled, and too talented not to get there. And while they definitely will have some big challenges along the way, namely Pittsburgh and then Chicago in the Stanley Cup Finals, I love this Washington Capitals team. And I think this is finally the year where they break those playoff demons and they get it done and defeat the Chicago Blackhawks, winning the Stanley Cup in 7 games. So that's the end of the video. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and feel free to go down in the comment section and let me know your predictions for who's going to be in the Stanley Cup Final and who's going to win, as well as whether or not you agree or disagree with my picks, and go ahead and leave some of your own as well if you'd like. Not only that, look forward to a lot of exciting content on this channel. We are truly living in the best time of the year for sports, with NHL and NBA playoffs, the NFL draft, and baseball season starting up, so definitely look for some great things in the future of this channel. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and take care.